Nancy burst through my office door without knocking, her face glowing with pure euphoria. I was deep in a heated call with Tokyo investors about our $500 million acquisition, but the sight of my daughter's breathless excitement made me instantly end the conversation. "Gentlemen, we'll continue this tomorrow." I clicked off the conference system. "Dad, I'm engaged!" Nancy practically shouted, thrusting her left hand toward me. The diamond caught the afternoon light streaming through the floor-to-ceiling windows, casting tiny rainbows across my mahogany desk. My Mont Blanc pen froze mid-click. Engaged. The word felt foreign on my tongue. When did this happen? Yesterday. Rick proposed in Bryant Park during lunch. It was perfect, Dad. He had a whole speech prepared about our future together. She collapsed into the client chair across from my desk. Her designer jeans and silk blouse a stark contrast to the corporate atmosphere. I studied her face carefully. Nancy had mentioned Rick sporadically over the past 6 months, but I knew almost nothing about him beyond his first name and his occupation. "Tell me about him again." "Rick. Rick Morrison. He works in investment banking at Steinberg and Associates. He's amazing, Dad. Ambitious, charming, everything I've ever wanted." Her nervous laugh made me lean forward. "And his family?" Something flickered across her expression. "They're lovely people. Actually, that's why I'm here." She twisted the engagement ring around her finger. "They've invited us for dinner tonight at 6. Rick wants to meet you properly. If you're watching this video, tell me where you're from or what time it is for you." I moved to the window, watching Manhattan buzz 47 floors below. "What aren't you telling me, sweetheart?" Nancy avoided my gaze. "It's just, could you maybe not mention the company? Or the Forbes articles?" There it was. The request I'd been expecting since Nancy turned 18 and started dating. Hide the wealth, pretend to be ordinary. "Rick's parents are very down to earth, and I don't want them to feel intimidated," she explained. "You want me to lie about who I am?" My voice was colder than I intended. "Not lie exactly," she pleaded. "Just downplay things. Drive the Toyota instead of the Bentley. Wear something casual." Her voice carried that same pleading tone I hadn't heard since she was 12 and wanted a puppy. I returned to my desk, my gaze falling on the silver Tiffany frame holding Elizabeth's photo. Her wisdom echoed in my mind, a familiar guidepost in moments of uncertainty. Character shows when people think nobody important is watching. My late wife, my brilliant Elizabeth, had always been the better judge of people. She saw the core of a person, while I saw the potential of a deal. Money doesn't change who someone is, George. It just reveals it. "Nancy, if this man truly loves you, shouldn't he accept all aspects of your life?" I asked, my voice softer now. "He does love me, but first impressions matter, and Rick's family values hard work and honesty. They might think I'm some spoiled rich girl if they knew." The irony wasn't lost on me. She wanted to build a foundation of honesty on a bed of deception. But this wasn't about me. It was a chance to see Rick Morrison for who he truly was, without the blinding glare of a multi-billion-dollar fortune. It was a test. "All right, Nancy, I'll do it your way." Her face lit up as she stood and kissed my forehead. "Thank you for understanding, Dad. This means everything to me. We're meeting at their house. 123 Kent Avenue in Brooklyn, 6 o'clock sharp." After she left, I stared at the address on my notepad. The wheels in my mind began turning, remembering Elizabeth's wisdom about character revealing itself when people think nobody important is watching. Perhaps it was time for a different kind of test. I loosened my tie, The weight of Nancy's request settled over me like a familiar burden. The drive to my penthouse on Park Avenue gave me time to think. The familiar elegance of the city couldn't calm the storm brewing in my chest. Nancy deserved happiness, but she also deserved protection from those who might see her as a prize rather than a person. Inside my 3,000-square-foot sanctuary overlooking Central Park, I found myself gravitating toward Elizabeth's jewelry box on the bedroom dresser. Her engagement ring still lay in its velvet slot, a modest solitaire I'd saved 3 months to afford. She'd loved it more than any diamond I could buy her later. This was about authenticity, something Rick Morrison was about to be tested on. In my walk-in closet, behind rows of handmade Italian suits, hung a garment I'd almost forgotten existed. A cheap suit purchased years ago from Target for a charity event. I'd worn it once, hating every polyester thread, but kept it as a reminder of a different world. Now, it might serve a greater purpose. The polyester suit felt strange against my skin after years of Italian tailoring. It clung where silk would flow, the slightly wrinkled fabric speaking of storage rather than care. Standing before my bedroom mirror, I methodically transformed myself. The Patek Philippe came off first, its intricate craftsmanship a symbol of the world I was leaving behind. I replaced it with a $25 Casio with a plastic band that showed the wrong time zone. My Hermes briefcase gave way to a stained canvas messenger bag I'd borrowed from the building's maintenance staff. The iPhone 15 Pro went into my safe, replaced by an ancient Samsung that barely held a charge. I practiced hunching my shoulders slightly, shortening my stride, and lowering my voice to match the blue-collar accent I'd heard from contractors over the years. George Hartwell, retired plumber, I murmured to my reflection. Modest pension, proud of my daughter's success. Elizabeth's jewelry box watched silently as I removed the platinum credit cards from my wallet, keeping only a basic debit card and $47 in cash. The transformation felt both theatrical and deeply personal, stripping away layers of wealth to reveal something closer to my origins. The elevator descended to the garage level where Marcus, our 60-year-old concierge, was reviewing evening deliveries. His eyes widened when he saw me, his professional training battling obvious confusion. "Good evening, Mr. Hartwell. Will you be needing the Bentley tonight?" His voice carried 20 years of discretion. "The Toyota, actually," I said, pulling out the keys to the 2010 Camry. Marcus's face remained perfectly neutral despite the bizarre request. "Of course, sir," he said. "Shall I warm it up for you?" "That's not necessary, Marcus. Just, if anyone asks, you didn't see me leave in anything unusual tonight." Marcus nodded solemnly. "I rarely see anything unusual, Mr. Hartwell. Have a pleasant evening." The Camry's interior smelled of vanilla air freshener and worn fabric. Compared to my other vehicles, it felt like stepping into a different life entirely. The AM/FM radio crackled to life, playing classic rock instead of the satellite news I was accustomed to. I adjusted the rearview mirror and caught my reflection again. The expensive haircut was a flaw in the costume, but everything else screamed ordinary middle-class American. The kind of man Rick Morrison's family would either welcome warmly or dismiss entirely. The GPS navigation spoke in its mechanical voice. "Proceed to 123 Kent Avenue, Brooklyn. Estimated travel time, 15 minutes. 15 minutes to cross not just boroughs, but entire social worlds." I gripped the Camry's worn steering wheel and pulled out of the garage, leaving my real life behind in the shadows of Park Avenue. The Holland Tunnel stretched ahead, carrying me toward what might be the most important performance of my life. Not for business, but for the only thing that truly mattered: Nancy's future happiness. The Toyota's engine ticked softly as I squeezed into a parking space between a Tesla Model S and a BMW X5. 123 Kent Avenue looked exactly as I'd expected. A renovated Williamsburg townhouse, trying hard to project a success it hadn't quite achieved. The fresh paint on the front steps was slightly uneven, a sign of determined DIY work. My cheap Casio read exactly 6:12 p.m. The doorbell rang with an expensive chime, though I noticed it was mounted slightly crooked. Footsteps approached, and the door swung open to reveal a man who could only be Rick Morrison. "You must be Nancy's father." His smile was practiced, professional. "Rick Morrison, pleasure to meet you." His handshake was firm but brief. I caught him discreetly wiping his palm on his pants afterward. The $200 shirt he wore wasn't designer, but it was trying hard to look like it. Everything about him screamed calculated presentation. "George Hartwell, thanks for having me over," I said, keeping my voice humble, adding just a touch of the blue-collar accent I'd practiced. Come in, come in. Nancy's been telling us wonderful things about you." The interior hit me immediately. New furniture with that slight chemical smell of recent financing, decorative elements chosen from a department store catalog, and a massive TV dominating the living room like a shrine to material priorities. "Mom, Dad, this is George." Rick's voice carried toward the kitchen. Mary Morrison appeared, wiping her hands on an apron with theatrical precision. Her scanning gaze took in my Target suit, scuffed shoes, and canvas messenger bag in approximately 3 seconds. The smile that followed didn't quite reach her eyes. "How lovely to meet you, George. I hope you found the place all right." "GPS got me here just fine, ma'am. Beautiful neighborhood you've got." "Well, it's certainly up and coming," she said, her tone suggesting she considered herself instrumental in that improvement. Tom Morrison emerged from the living room, offering a perfunctory nod in my direction, before focusing entirely on Nancy, who had just appeared from the kitchen. "Nancy, sweetheart, you look radiant. Engagement suits you." I watched the family dynamics unfold like a carefully choreographed performance. "Please sit down." Mary gestured toward what was obviously the least comfortable chair, the one with the slightly wobbly leg that guests got stuck with. "So, George," Rick settled into his obvious favorite chair, establishing dominance. "Nancy mentioned you're retired. What line of work were you in?" "Plumbing, mostly. Did some contracting work, too." I shifted uncomfortably in the wobbly chair, staying true to character. "Honest work, you know." Rick's expression shifted almost imperceptibly, the look of a man confirming his assumptions about social hierarchy. "Ah, skilled trades. Very practical." The condescension in that word was perfectly calibrated. Not quite an insult, but definitely a categorization. As we moved to the dining room, I caught Rick's satisfied expression reflected in a darkened window. He thought he'd successfully established the pecking order. He had no idea how right he was, just not in the way he imagined. Mary directed me to a chair that immediately wobbled under my weight. The dining room continued the theme of expensive-looking affordability. Rick uncorked a wine bottle with ceremonial precision. "This is a 2019 Cabernet from Sonoma County. Excellent vintage," he explained, clearly directing his wine education at me. "Sounds expensive," I offered, watching him pour. Tom raised his glass. "To Rick and Nancy's future together, and to families coming together, despite different backgrounds." The toast hung in the air like a challenge. Nancy's face flushed, but she lifted her glass with the rest of us. "So, George, Rick began, cutting his roast with surgical precision. Retirement must be nice. No more crawling under sinks, am I right? Had my share of tight spaces, that's for sure. I deliberately used the wrong fork for my salad. But honest work's honest work. Absolutely, Rick agreed with the tone of someone humoring a child. Of course, in my line of work, we focus more on leveraging intellectual capital. Last week alone, I facilitated a merger worth $50,000 to our firm. I nodded respectfully, though internally I noted that $50,000 was pocket change for a normal business lunch in my world. Rick has such wonderful connections, Mary chimed in. He dines at Le Bernardin regularly with clients. The irony wasn't lost on me. They were name-dropping a restaurant where I could buy out the entire establishment for the evening without checking my balance. Of course, once you're married, priorities change, Mary added with meaningful emphasis to Nancy. Rick will provide well. You might not need to work at all. Nancy's fork paused halfway to her mouth. I enjoy my career. Rick nodded sagely. Financial planning is crucial. Generational wealth doesn't build itself. He glanced at me. I imagine that's not something your family has much experience with, George. Can't say it is, I agreed mildly, suppressing the urge to mention my portfolio could buy his entire neighborhood. That's why Nancy's so fortunate, Rick continued. She'll never have to worry about limitations again. The word limitations hit Nancy like a physical blow. Her face went through a series of expressions: confusion, hurt, then something approaching recognition. The evening was reaching its natural conclusion, but the real test was just beginning. After a tour of Tom's photo album featuring his luxury 15-year-old Cadillac, Rick settled back into his chair with obvious satisfaction. George, I want you to know I take my responsibilities seriously. Nancy will never want for anything. His tone carried the weight of a royal decree. I understand her background might make this transition challenging, but I'm committed to elevating her lifestyle appropriately. Nancy's sharp intake of breath was audible across the room. I'll make sure she has access to the right social circles, proper cultural experiences, Rick continued, oblivious to his fiancée's growing distress. Someone from her background couldn't be expected to navigate these waters alone. That was the moment Nancy's face truly changed. The love-struck optimism I'd seen all evening finally cracked, revealing something raw underneath. We should go, she said quietly, standing abruptly. Outside, the cool evening air carried the sounds of normal Brooklyn life. Our Toyota looked even more shabby among the neighborhood's carefully curated vehicles. Nancy, I began gently. Don't. Her voice was tight with controlled emotion. Just don't start. Did you hear the way he talked about you? About us? She whirled around, tears starting to form. He loves me, Dad. They're protective of their family. Protective? I kept my voice calm despite the rage building inside. Sweetheart, that man just spent 2 hours explaining how inadequate your father is and how fortunate you are to escape your background. You don't understand. The words exploded out of her. This is exactly what I was afraid of. You judging them judging us. Nobody giving anyone a real chance. I gave them a chance. I sat there for 2 hours while they insulted everything about who we are. Who we are? Nancy's laugh was bitter. Dad, you drove here in a 20-year-old car wearing a Target suit. That's not who we are. No, it's not, I said, the irony hitting like a physical blow. But Rick doesn't know that. And look how he treated me anyway. He was nervous. Meeting parents is stressful, she shot back, making excuses for him. Nancy, listen to yourself. You're making excuses for someone who just told a dinner table you're moving up in the world by marrying him. Maybe I am, her voice cracked. Maybe this is my chance to build something better. Better than what? Better than me? The question hung between us like a sword. Her face crumpled, but her voice remained defiant. Better than hiding who I am because you think money corrupts everyone. Better than pretending to be something I'm not because you can't trust me to make my own decisions. Tears were flowing freely now. Nancy, I'm 28 years old. I'm not your little girl anymore, and Rick is not some gold digger you need to test and approve. If you marry him, I said, my voice heavy with a certainty that chilled me, you'll spend the rest of your life apologizing for who you used to be. And if I don't, she retorted, her words a final, devastating blow, I'll spend the rest of my life wondering if I gave up my happiness to make you feel better about being alone. Her hand flew to her mouth, but it was too late. The words were out, and we both knew she had meant them. I'm sorry, she whispered. If you can't support my decision, she said, her voice hardening again, then maybe you shouldn't come to the wedding. She ran toward the house, her footsteps echoing off the concrete steps. The front door closed with a dreadful finality, leaving me alone under the streetlight beside my disguised car. Inside the Toyota, I sat in silence, the worn seats and cheap radio props in a performance that had revealed more truth than I'd bargained for. The test was over, but the real consequences were just beginning. The drive through Williamsburg's gentrified streets felt like traveling between universes. I passed artisanal coffee shops and overpriced restaurants that Rick probably considered impressive, heading toward the Brooklyn Bridge where the Manhattan skyline waited like a reminder of who I really was. Traffic crawled, trapping me between worlds, literally and figuratively. Halfway across the bridge, I pulled into a legal viewpoint area and let the engine idle. The East River stretched below, Manhattan's lights reflecting like scattered diamonds on the dark water. This was the view that had inspired me during my early, struggling years, back when I'd drive Elizabeth here in my actual beat-up car to dream about the future. I pulled down the sun visor, revealing her photo tucked behind it. Her smile looked back at me, patient and knowing. She hates me right now, I said to the photo, my voice barely audible over the bridge traffic. Our daughter thinks I'm a controlling monster who can't stand her happiness. Elizabeth's remembered voice seemed to whisper back. Give her time, George. Love doesn't disappear overnight, even when it's hurt. But what if I was wrong? What if I'd pushed too hard, revealed Rick's character in a way that forced Nancy to choose sides? The look in her eyes as she ran back to that house wasn't just anger. It was disappointment in me. By the time I reached Park Avenue, exhaustion was setting in. The garage attendant took my keys with legendary discretion, as if billionaires regularly returned home in 15-year-old Toyotas wearing Target suits. My key turned in the lock, and I stepped back into my actual world, still wearing the clothes of a lie that had revealed an unbearable truth. I finally stripped off the polyester suit in my penthouse bedroom. Each piece of the costume, the cheap watch, the messenger bag, the scuffed shoes, seemed to carry the weight of the evening's revelations. My heart wasn't in any of it. My feeling was that Rick was a fraud, but feelings weren't enough. I couldn't destroy my daughter's happiness based on a gut instinct. I needed proof. The next 3 weeks passed in a blur of professional obligations and personal torment. Board meetings continued, acquisition deals progressed, but my focus was gone. My assistant, Mark, noticed immediately. "Sir, the Henderson merger documents need your review," he'd say, then wait patiently while I stared out the window, seeing Nancy's angry face instead of the spring foliage in Central Park. Starting May 18th, I called her every day, 3 times a day. Her phone went straight to voicemail each time, the telltale sign of a blocked number. My messages grew increasingly desperate. "Nancy, sweetheart, please call me back. We need to talk." Then, "I know you're angry, but I love you. That hasn't changed." Finally, "I just want you to be happy. That's all I've ever wanted." The flower delivery attempt on May 20th was equally futile. 3 dozen white roses, her favorite since childhood, were returned to the shop with a delivery refused notation. The handwritten note on my personal stationery came back unopened. Desperate for any connection, I found myself checking her Instagram account. She'd never made it private, probably never imagining her father would resort to social media stalking. The posts were a catalog of wedding preparations, dress fittings, venue tastings, bridal shower photos with friends I'd watched grow up. Rick featured prominently in every image, his arm around Nancy's waist, his smile proprietary and satisfied. There were no mentions of me anywhere. It was as if I'd been completely erased from her wedding narrative. Each image was another dagger. One afternoon, a notification pinged on my encrypted email account, one I reserved for only the most sensitive corporate communications. The sender was anonymous, the subject line cryptic. Regarding Rick Morrison. My heart hammered against my ribs. The message was brief. "Mr. Morrison is not who he appears to be. I have information you may find valuable. If you want it, meet me at the west entrance of the New York Public Library tomorrow at 7 a.m. Come alone." I had Mark, my ever-discreet assistant, run a trace on the email's origin. It was heavily masked, but the faint digital breadcrumbs led back to a server used by Steinberg and Associates. Someone on the inside was reaching out. The next morning, I stood by the stone lion, feeling more like a spy than a CEO. A young man approached, his posture nervous, his eyes darting around the sparse crowd. He looked barely older than Nancy. "Mr. Hartwell?" he asked, his voice a nervous whisper. "You have me at a disadvantage." "My name is David Chen. I was a junior analyst at Steinberg." "Was?" "I was fired yesterday," he said, his gaze dropping to the pavement. "Look, I know this is weird, but I couldn't just let this happen. My family? We wouldn't have survived after my dad got sick if it wasn't for one of your foundation's grants. The Hartwell Education Initiative paid for my entire degree at NYU." I stared at him, stunned. One of the countless checks I'd signed, one of the programs Elizabeth had championed, had just come back to me in the most unexpected way. When I saw the wedding announcement and your name connected to Rick Morrison, I knew I had to do something. "Rick. He's a predator, Mr. Hartwell. He targets people, and he's in deep, deep trouble." "What kind of trouble?" "He's been cooking the books," David said, his words spilling out in a rush. "Falsifying client portfolios to hide massive losses, promising returns he can't deliver. There's an internal investigation, and he knows he's about to be exposed. He's been bragging for months about landing a whale, a fiancée from an old money family who could solve all his problems. He thinks your family's wealth is his get-out-of-jail-free card." The pieces clicked into place. The condescension, the desperation to impress, the focus on elevating Nancy's lifestyle. It wasn't about social climbing. It was about survival. "Can you prove this?" I asked, my voice low and urgent. David nodded, pulling a small encrypted USB drive from his pocket. "It's all here," The real portfolio numbers versus the ones he sent to clients. Internal emails where he discusses his strategy to secure a wealthy marriage. I made copies before they wiped my system. He handed me the drive. It felt heavy in my palm, the weight of incontrovertible proof. This was the weapon I needed. A quiet intervention. I could show this to Nancy, just the two of us. No public spectacle, no humiliation. Just the cold, hard truth that would allow her to walk away with her dignity intact. "Thank you, David," I said, my voice thick with gratitude. "You've done the right thing. I'll make sure you're taken care of." But the next evening, my phone rang with a frantic, blocked number. It was David, his voice choked with panic. "He knows, Mr. Hartwell. He knows I talked to you." "What happened?" "I don't know how, but he must have been watching me. He cornered me outside my apartment. He had this look in his eyes. He said he knew I'd copied the files. He smashed my phone, smashed the laptop I used. And the drive? He took the original drive from my bag. He knows I gave you a copy." My blood ran cold. "David, are you all right?" "He didn't hurt me, but he said if that information ever gets out, he'll make sure I never work in finance again. He said he'd ruin my family. Mr. Hartwell, he destroyed the drive, the one I gave you." I froze. I hadn't made a copy. In my haste to handle the situation delicately, I had carried the sole piece of evidence in my briefcase, which was currently locked in my office safe. How could he have destroyed it? "I don't know. He said, 'Your billionaire friend won't be able to use this now.' He laughed about it. 'I'm so sorry, sir, I failed.'" He hadn't failed. I had. I had underestimated Rick's paranoia and his ruthlessness. My quiet, elegant solution was gone. The advantage was lost. Rick had not only destroyed the evidence, but had also drawn a line in the sand. He was calling my bluff, confident that without proof, it was my word against his. And he knew Nancy would choose him. Chinfio, with the evidence destroyed and no way to reach Nancy, I was backed into a corner. Rick's actions had made one thing clear. A quiet conversation was no longer an option. He had escalated this from a matter of character to a declaration of war. If a public confrontation was what he wanted, a public confrontation was what he would get. "Mark," I called my assistant the next morning, my voice stripped of all emotion. "Get me the details for the Morrison Hartwell wedding. The Plaza, June 5th. I need everything. Guest list, floor plan, vendor contracts, everything." Mark's expression remained professionally neutral, but I caught the slight raise of his eyebrow. 20 years of working together had taught him when not to ask questions. By evening, he had a complete report. 200 guests, afternoon ceremony in the Oak Room, evening reception in the Grand Ballroom. Total cost approximately $150,000. Rick's contribution, $50,000 in cash, likely the check I had given Nancy, and $100,000 in credit obligations. He was leveraging his future with Nancy to pay for a wedding designed to impress people with money he didn't have. "One more thing, Mark," I said. "Get me Bill Patterson's direct number at the Plaza. We did that children's hospital benefit there last year." Shopping for my attire felt like preparing for battle. At Bergdorf's, I selected a charcoal Armani suit, an Italian silk tie, and a new Patek Philippe watch. These weren't just clothes. They were signals, accessories that would immediately identify me to anyone who understood wealth. No more costumes. No more hiding. The night before the wedding, I sat in my study with Elizabeth's photo and a glass of 30-year-old scotch. "She doesn't want me there," I told the image. "She's made that clear. But Elizabeth's smile seemed to say what she'd always said. Sometimes love means showing up when you're not wanted. On the morning of June 5th, I showered, shaved, and dressed with the precision of a general. The Armani suit fit like a second skin. The Patek Philippe caught the light from the window. In the mirror, I saw George Hartwell as the world knew him. Successful, powerful, uncompromising. The kind of man who didn't take no for an answer, especially from his own daughter. I called Bill Patterson. "George, congratulations on Nancy's wedding. I assume you'll be needing our VIP service today." "Actually, Bill," I said, my voice calm and steady, "I need a different kind of favor." The black Mercedes S-Class limousine pulled up to the plaza's Fifth Avenue entrance with whispered precision. My chauffeur, uniformed and white-gloved, opened the door with practiced deference. Stepping onto the sidewalk, I felt the weight of my authentic self. The $5,000 Armani suit, the Patek Philippe gleaming at my wrist, the Italian leather shoes reflecting the plaza's legendary marble. The transformation was complete. This was George Hartwell as the world knew him. Other wedding guests were arriving, a parade of carefully curated success. But none of them carried themselves with the quiet confidence that came from actual wealth, rather than its imitation. I walked through the plaza's glass doors, the sound of a string quartet drifting from the lobby. Near the entrance to the Oak Room, a polite but professional guard stood with an iPad guest list. "Good afternoon, sir. Name, please." "George Hartwell." His finger scrolled down the screen, paused, then scrolled again. "I'm sorry, sir, but I don't see that name on our registry." A few guests turned to stare at the well-dressed man being denied entry. Whispers rippled through the small crowd. This was part of the plan. A public, yet controlled, disruption. "There must be some mistake," I said, my voice carrying just enough to be overheard. "I'm the bride's father." The guard's expression softened with genuine sympathy, but his training held firm. "I understand this is difficult, sir, but my instructions are very clear. Only guests on the approved list may enter." The humiliation, though staged, stung more than I'd expected. I stepped aside and pulled out my phone, speed dialing Bill Patterson. "Bill, it's George. I'm in your lobby, and there seems to be a misunderstanding about my access to the Morrison-Hartwell wedding." "Give me 30 seconds, he replied. True to his word, Bill appeared almost immediately, crossing the lobby with the measured urgency of a seasoned hotel executive. "Mr. Hartwell, my sincere apologies. Please follow me." He led me away from the main guest flow, through a discreet service corridor marked "Hotel Personnel Only." "I understand this is a delicate family situation," Bill murmured as we walked. "We'll get you inside without any further complications." The service route took us through the plaza's working heart, past the commercial kitchen where a 4-tiered wedding cake stood like a monument to Rick's ambitions. We reached a discreet door marked "Ballroom Service." Bill's hand paused on the handle. "Mr. Hartwell, are you certain about this approach?" "I've tried conventional, Bill. This is my last chance to see if I was right about her choice." He nodded with understanding and opened the door. The grand ballroom took my breath away. Crystal chandeliers cast a warm light over 200 guests, and a live orchestra provided classical accompaniment. And there she was, Nancy, radiant in her wedding dress, standing beside Rick at an altar decorated with white roses. Even from my position at the ballroom's periphery, I could see her happiness, a joy that made her practically glow. The officiant was speaking. "You may now kiss the bride." Rick lifted Nancy's veil and kissed her with theatrical passion, performing for his audience. Applause erupted as my daughter officially became Mrs. Nancy Morrison. I remained at the edge of the crowd, partially concealed by the service corridor entrance, as the recessional began. Champagne appeared on silver trays, and congratulations flowed freely. Rick, basking in the attention, began scanning the crowd with obvious satisfaction. His moment of triumph, his successful social climbing validated by a ballroom full of witnesses. That's when his eyes found mine. Recognition hit him like a physical blow. The confident smile faltered, replaced by confusion, then dawning comprehension. The poor plumber he'd humiliated 3 weeks ago stood before him in a $5,000 suit, clearly belonging in this world of wealth and privilege. Our eyes locked across the ballroom, and I saw the exact moment Rick Morrison realized he'd made a terrible, terrible mistake. Rick's confident stride cut through the cocktail hour chatter like a blade. His tuxedo was perfectly pressed, his smile predatory, and his eyes locked on mine with growing fury. Wedding guests, sipping champagne, turned to watch, oblivious to the drama about to unfold. "What the hell are you doing here?" Rick's voice carried enough venom to stop conversations within a 10-foot radius. I remained perfectly still, hands clasped behind my back. The Armani suit felt like armor. "I believe this is my daughter's wedding." My voice was calm, measured, carrying the authority of someone accustomed to being heard. "Your daughter explicitly told you not to come. Security!" Rick spun around, looking for assistance. "This man is trespassing." A small crowd began to form, their attention shifting from small talk to the unfolding spectacle. I recognized the type. New York's wealthy elite, people who fed on drama and social positioning. Rick's voice rose another octave. "This is Nancy's father, the plumber I told you about. He's been banned from this wedding, and he's making a scene." The crowd pressed closer, smartphones emerging from designer clutches. That's when Michael Steinberg dropped his champagne glass. The crystal shattered against the marble floor with a sound that cut through the ballroom noise. Michael, a prominent tech investor and, ironically, Rick's ultimate boss, stood frozen, staring at me with dawning recognition. "Oh my God," he whispered, then louder. "George Hartwell from Neuroch." Rick turned toward the voice, confusion replacing aggression. "What?" Michael pulled out his phone with trembling fingers, scrolling rapidly. "Forbes magazine, Tech Visionary of the Year, George Hartwell, founder and CEO of Neuroch AI, net worth $2.3 billion. The crowd's murmur grew to a roar. More phones appeared, screens glowing as guests began their own searches. "That's impossible," Rick stammered, his face draining of color. "He's a plumber. He drives a beat-up Toyota. From a penthouse that overlooks the bridge I crossed to visit your family's home 3 weeks ago," I finished quietly. Rick's mouth opened and closed soundlessly. The search results were spreading like wildfire. Guests showed each other their screens, whispered confirmations, and recorded videos. The elegant wedding reception was transforming into something else entirely. "Please, Mr. Hartwell, sir." Rick's hand shook as he reached for my arm. "There's been a terrible misunderstanding." I took a single step backward, maintaining my dignity as his desperation became apparent to everyone watching. "No misunderstanding, Rick. You showed me exactly who you are. The only question now is whether Nancy sees it too." Rick dropped to his knees on the marble floor, the glass shards from Michael's champagne flute surrounding him like fallen stars. "Please," he begged, his voice cracking. "I didn't know. If you had known I was wealthy, My voice carried across the ballroom, clear and final. You would have treated me with respect. That tells me everything I need to know about your character. From across the room, I saw Nancy turning toward the commotion, her wedding dress flowing behind her as she moved through the crowd. Michael Steinberg held his tablet high, the Forbes article clear for everyone to see. My photo stared back from the screen. Confident, successful, the man I actually was. Look at this, Michael called to the growing crowd. George Hartwell, Neurock founder, net worth $2.3 billion. Phones emerged from every direction. The quiet murmur of investigation grew louder with each confirmation. You wore a Target suit, Rick whispered, his voice carrying in the sudden hush. You drove a beat-up car. You said you were a plumber. I never said I was poor, Rick, I replied, adjusting my Patek Philippe, a gesture noticed by several guests. You assumed that because of how I looked. You treated me with contempt because you thought I couldn't help your career. Mary and Tom Morrison appeared at the edge of the crowd, their faces pale as they recognized the scope of the disaster. We didn't know, Mary whispered to anyone who would listen. We had no idea who he was. Someone near the back announced, "Someone's coming." Through the parting guests, I saw Nancy approaching, her face a mask of confusion, then growing recognition as she saw me standing in the center of the commotion. "Dad?" Her voice cut through the ballroom noise like a knife through silk. The crowd fell completely silent. Even the string quartet stopped playing. Nancy stood at the edge of the circle, taking in the scene. Her new husband on his knees amid broken glass, guests holding phones displaying my Forbes profile, and me standing calmly in the center of it all. "Dad, what are you doing here?" Her voice was small, confused, but not angry. I looked at my daughter, beautiful in her wedding dress, and felt my heart break and heal simultaneously. "I came to see my daughter get married," I said simply, even if she didn't want me here. Her eyes filled with tears as understanding washed over her face. It all clicked into place. "You're not a plumber," she whispered. "I never was, sweetheart. I just wanted to see what kind of man you were marrying." The ballroom fell silent except for the soft rustling of Nancy's dress as she moved toward me, each step creating distance between her and Rick. "I'm so sorry, Dad." The words came out in a rush. I should have listened. I should have trusted your judgment. My arms opened automatically as she reached me, and suddenly I was holding my daughter again, wedding dress and all. The expensive fabric crushed between us, but neither of us cared. "I love you," I whispered into her hair. "That's all that matters." After a moment, I gently stepped back and looked toward the wedding band. "May I borrow your microphone?" The band leader, sensing the moment's importance, quickly handed it over. "Ladies and gentlemen," I began, my voice carrying across the ballroom. "I want to thank you for sharing this important day with my daughter, Nancy. Despite some complications, this is still her wedding day, and she deserves to celebrate." Applause rippled through the crowd. Nancy squeezed my hand, tears still flowing, but her smile radiant. "I also want to establish some new family ground rules." I looked directly at Rick, who had finally managed to stand. "Nancy has chosen to marry Rick Morrison, and I respect that decision." Rick nodded frantically, understanding he was being offered survival, not forgiveness. "Nancy will always be welcome in my home. Her husband will be tolerated when necessary, but only because Nancy loves him." I paused, letting the message sink in. Are we clear on these terms? Yes, sir, Rick managed, his voice barely audible. I handed the microphone back to the bandleader and turned to Nancy. Now, would you honor me with a dance? I'd love to, Dad. As we moved to the dance floor, the orchestra struck up a waltz. I guided Nancy through the steps we'd practiced when she was 12, and still believed her father was the smartest man in the world. I really messed up, didn't I? She said quietly. You fell in love. That's not a mistake. I spun her gently, her dress creating a perfect circle around us. But maybe next time, trust your old man's instincts about character. There won't be a next time. She laughed through her tears. I'm married now. Yes, you are. And despite everything, I hope you'll be happy. From the corner of my eye, I could see Rick watching us from the sidelines, his parents beside him looking shell-shocked. The Morrison family's social climbing had backfired spectacularly, but they would survive. Rick would remain married to Nancy, but on terms he never could have imagined. Will you really let him come to family dinners? Nancy asked. If you want him there, yes, but he'll sit at the children's table. Nancy's laughter filled the ballroom, pure and joyful. As the song ended, I kissed her forehead and smiled. Welcome to married life, sweetheart. Just remember, if he ever treats you badly, you know where to find me. I love you, Dad. I love you too. Now go enjoy your reception. You're only going to have one wedding day. She returned to her new husband, who took her hand with obvious relief and gratitude. The celebration continued, but the power dynamics had shifted permanently. Elizabeth would have been proud. True class had nothing to do with bank account balances. It had everything to do with character. If this story resonated with you, leave a like and consider subscribing. You can also drop any comment below, even just one word. Maybe tell me where you're watching from, or what time it is right now. Sometimes one word is enough to say you were here.